At that time, I was 24 years old and was an enlisted scout under General Custer's command. Mitch Boyer was our interpreter. I was sent ahead. Custer said, "You go and find that village." I went to a butte at the head of Reno Creek, from where I could see the village. I reported the camp to Custer. He asked if any were running about away from the camp. I said no. We then came on down to the forks of Reno Creek. When we stopped there to divide up, I could hear the Indians in camp shouting and whooping. When we separated, Half Yellowface and White Swan were ordered to go with Reno. Goes ahead, White Man runs him, Curly and myself were ordered to go with Custer. We came down and crossed Reno Creek. Mitch Boyer was ahead with the 4 scouts right behind. Custer was ahead of his command a short distance behind us. Custer yelled to us to stop, then told us to go to the high hill ahead. From here we could see the village and could see Reno fighting. He had crossed the creek. Everything was a scramble with lots of Sioux. The battle was over in a few minutes. We thought they were all killed. We 4 scouts turned and charged north to where Custer was headed for. 3 of us stopped to fire into the village. We saw no more of Curly after that. I don't know where he went. When we met Custer, he asked, "How is it?" I said, "Reno's men are fighting hard." We went with the command down into a dry gulch where we could not see the village. Custer told Mitch Boyer to tell us to go back to the pack train, which we did. We met Benteen's command just south of where they afterward entrenched. We said to Benteen, "Do you hear that shooting back where we came from? They're fighting Custer there now." We started to leave Benteen to join the Re-Scouts, who were quite a way back up the creek. But Benteen told us to stay, and we did. We went with him and helped dig entrenchments. The firing seemed to stop where Custer was, and the Sioux came toward us. Then Reno's command came back where we were entrenched. Just before sundown, the enemy drew off. We had been fighting quite a while. We 3 scouts got away and rode till we came to the Bighorn, but did not cross that night. It was dark and raining. The next morning, some Crow scouts of Bradley's command came along and followed us, where we had crossed the river. They joined us, and we all rode to the main Crow camp, 2 sleeps away on Pryor Creek. This is the way it happened, just as near as I can remember. Harry Moccasin.
I discovered almost hidden the dead body of an Indian. I did not go up close to it, but I could see the scalp was gone. That puzzled me. Could this be a Crow or a Shoshone? I had not known of there being any Indians belonging to these soldiers killed here. As I stood there looking, it seemed there was something familiar about the appearance of that body. I backed away and went to find my brother Yellowhair. We 2 returned to the place. We got off our horses and walked to the dead Indian. We rolled the body over and looked closely. "Yes, it is Lame White Man," my brother agreed. We called other Cheyennes. Several of them came. All of them promptly confirmed our identification. All of us were satisfied some Sioux had scalped him or maybe had killed him, finding him in among the soldiers and supposing him to be a Crow or a Shoshone belonging to them. We knew he had gone with the young men in their charge upon the soldiers there. Perhaps he had gone farther than the others and was killed on his way back to us, the killer mistaking him for an attacking enemy Indian. A bullet had gone in at his right breast and out at his back. He also had many stab wounds. He was still dressed in his best clothing, none of it having been taken. The Cheyennes never made any inquiries among the Sioux concerning the case. We just kept quiet about it. A dead Unkpapa Sioux received something of the same kind of mistaken attention given to our Lame White Man. The dead Sioux was mixed in with dead bodies of the soldiers. An Arapaho and a no-clothing Indian supposed him to be a Crow or a Shoshone belonging to the white men fighters. They jabbed spears many times into the body. They were much embarrassed when they realized their mistake. Wooden leg.
I was 23 that summer and had been a warrior a long time. Another hunk papa named Gray Eagle and I were Sitting Bull's special bodyguards. It was our duty to watch him and see that he had protection. That morning, I took the family horses to the river. At midday, I went back to the pony herd and drove the horses to the river for the noon watering. Just then, I heard shooting near the hunk papa camp circle. I quickly caught a pony and turned the others loose, knowing they would head back to camp. Not far away, I saw dust rising and heard iron-shod hooves pounding against loose rocks. I raced back to the teepee I shared with my uncle. The hunk papa camp was in an uproar. Warriors were rushing around to catch their ponies. Women were screaming, children were crying, and old men were shouting advice as loud as they could. Then the women and children began to run off to the west, not taking the time to strike their teepees or to carry of belongings. I reached the teepee ahead of my uncle. I grabbed my old muzzleloader and quickly checked it. Just then, Sitting Bull entered the teepee and took the old rifle out of my hands. He handed me a stone-headed war club, then took his own rawhide shield out of its buckskin case and hung it over my shoulder. "You will take my place and go out and meet the soldiers that are attacking us," he ordered. "Parley with them, if you can. If they are willing, tell them I will talk peace with them." Lone Bull and the warriors rode out to meet the soldiers and came under fire straight away. Soldiers dismounted and made for the river. We killed many soldiers on the riverbank and more in the water. I rode up behind one soldier and hit him with my war club. Then I slid off my pony and held the soldier's head underwater. My name is One Bull.
My father taught me how to use the bow and arrow and also how to ride a horse, and soon it became natural for me to ride. I soon grew to be able to use the bow and arrow that my father used. With it, I killed buffalo. My father taught me to pity the old men and women, and when I went on the warpath to be brave and even try to die on the field. My father also taught me that it was better to go on the field of battle and have my body filled with arrows from the enemy, and die on the field and let the wolves come and eat up my flesh and bones, rather than be wrapped up and buried in some high tree. And in this spirit, I went forth into all my fights. I remember when I was very young, I went on the warpath and carried the bundles of moccasins and provisions for the war party. When I was 15 years old, I went with my first war party. The snow was very deep and hard so that the horses slipped around. We charged upon the Assiniboines. I remember when we charged the camp, we found one Indian down in the creek trapping foxes. We did not know he was there. As soon as he saw us, he ran toward his own camp, and I whipped up my horse and ran after him. The enemy came out with guns and bows and arrows. I ran the man clear into the midst of the smoke. I came back without even myself or my horse getting hurt. That is how I got my name, Runs the Enemy. I was then at the age of 15. When we got back to camp, the Sioux people said I did not know what I was doing, and I replied that I knew that was what my father had taught me. I performed this deed in the face of a lot of brave warriors, and this is how my name is great among the Sioux. There was a lifelong hatred between the Sioux and the Assiniboines. My father was wounded by the Assiniboines, and I made up my mind I was going to do something to that tribe. I have been in about 40 battles altogether, rather insignificant some of them, but about 10 great battles. When I was about 18, a band of Sioux, including myself, went down to the Black Rees. They greatly outnumbered us. We attacked them, but did not kill any of them. They pursued us a long way, killing 5 of our number. My horse was hit with an arrow, and I jumped off, and while I was running, I was shot through the ankle with an arrow. The enemy surrounded me. My own friends had gone on. I crossed my wounded ankle over the other foot and defended myself as best I could. I looked at the ground and the sky and made up my mind that this was my last day. Just at this moment, while I was surrounded by my enemies, one of my friends was brave enough to come back. He rode into the midst of our foes and put me on the back of his horse, and we rode away in safety. Let me tell you about the other wound that I received. In one of the late battles that we had with the tribe of Black Reese in 1874, I was shot through the thigh, a ball also going through the forearm, and breaking the bone. I will tell you about my connection with the Battle of the Rosebud. With my war party, I joined the Sioux camp on the Rosebud River. We camped first at Lame Deer. When I arrived at the Sioux camp at Lame Deer, we were near the Cheyenne camp, and the Cheyennes had built a big bonfire. They were singing and dancing around the fire. I was told that there were some Cheyennes that had reached camp that day or the day before from the Black Hills, and they brought the news that the soldiers were coming. The reason for the campfire and the dancing was to pick out the bravest of the Cheyennes and send them back to find out the location of the troops and bring back word. The campfire was so big and so bright, and the dancing and shooting so boisterous that I went over to the Cheyenne camp to see for myself. And I saw them choosing the braves for this scouting duty. The scouts must have numbered 10. They started right off on their mission. The next morning we broke camp and came over the hills. We camped about half a day's journey from the Custer battlefield. That night after we camped, there was no news, and I went to bed and went to sleep. The next morning I was awakened by firing, and the report came to me that there was going to be trouble, for the troops were coming. Almost at once, everybody who could ride a horse or hold a gun mounted his horse and rode away to meet the troops. The Cheyenne scouts led the way. It was not very long until I heard the report of rifles over in the gully. After the report of the guns, we heard a cry from the hilltop. An Indian was on the hill crying as hard as he could, telling us to make the charge at once. Then one of their number was killed outright. The occasion of the shots was that 4 or 5 of our Sioux had gone around us and had gone into the soldiers' camp and stolen some horses, and the soldiers were firing at the horse thieves. 4 of them escaped, 1 being killed. This was the screaming we heard. We no sooner heard it than we made a dash. I cannot tell you the number of our Indians. There were the different bands of the Sioux and the entire tribe of the Cheyennes. The charge we made was enough to scare anybody. As we got on top of the hill, the soldiers, who were already after the horse thieves, knowing that we outnumbered them, all fled back. The cavalry, supported by a file of infantry, stopped, and we also stopped and had a great battle there. We simply circled them and did not give them a chance to charge, as we greatly outnumbered them. We killed a great many soldiers, shot down a good many of their horses, for there were lots of them lying on the ground, wounded and dead. This battle the Indians called the Battle of the Wolf Mountains, known to the soldiers and the Crows by this name, and to the Sioux as the Battle of the Head of the Rosebud. The general sentiment was that we were victorious in that battle, for the soldiers did not come upon us, but retreated back into Wyoming. We understood that General Crook was in command of the United States troops, led by Crow Scouts. They called General Crook 3 Stars. When our Indians made the charge upon the United States troops, we found the Crow Scouts standing between us and the troops. If it had not been for the Crow Scouts, we would have charged right through to the soldiers. The Crow Scouts were in between us and received the fire from both sides. After the battle ended and the soldiers went, we got home to our camp without any fear. We spent the whole of the next day in camp at the Little Rosebud, and the day after we came over onto the plains by the Custer battlefield. Runs the enemy, Sioux.